Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome to a Sunday Hidden Comic Book Gem edition of Grammaticus Books. And for this Sunday Hidden Comic Book Gem, we are delving back into the pages of the Dragon magazine. Dragon magazine, published by TSR, the creators, or I should say the issuers, they're creators of Dungeons and Dragons. And this is their monthly magazine that they put out in order to promote their game, Dungeons and Dragons. And in this magazine, they had two very big comic book lines that they ran in it. And the first comic book line that they ran in here on an episodic basis, they published 1 to 4 pages of each, with almost every issue, was Wormy by Dave Trampier. And I already did a video on that excellent comic book. But the other comic that they ran in Dragon magazine that was actually more famous than Wormy, even though from a production quality standpoint, it wasn't quite up to the standards of Wormy, but then who is? But that other Dragon magazine comic book was Finieous Fingers. Finieous Fingers, the Dungeons and Dragons thief, the greatest thief in the world as he self-proclaims. The adventures that he and his two adventuring buddies, the two human fighters, Fred and Charlie, and their adventures contained here within Finieous Fingers. And this is a 1981 anthology published by TSR that collected the first 2 story arcs of Finieous Fingers. And those ran starting in Dragon Magazine number 3 in 1976, all the way through Dragon Magazine number 54 that was published in 1980. So how this got started, Finieous Fingers was created by a student, an Auburn University student by the name of J.D. Webster. And he was running a gaming group at Auburn University. And in 1976, they had Origins 2, a gaming convention in Baltimore that he and a bunch of his buddies went to. And at that convention, one of his friends grabbed him and physically dragged him over to the table, where Gary Gygax was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they forced J.D. Webster to show Gary Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, just a mythic figure at this point, his cartoons of Phineas Fingers. And Gary Gygax liked him so much, he put him in touch with the Dragon magazine editor, and starting in issue 3, they did black and white runs of Phineas Fingers. And it became so popular so quickly and got so much fan mail that within a couple of months' issues, they had him create full-page color comic books of Phineas Fingers. And it's just a humor strip that makes fun of and lampoons everything to do with Dungeons and Dragons, all the Dungeons and Dragons themes and memes and rules and items, the things that you could pick up and the monsters. It just absolutely turns them on its head and pokes fun at them every which way it can. And then it would suck in some modern culture as well and would turn it on his head. And it just did it in a wonderful fashion. And it built up these characters with just great personalities. It made them come alive. And it was just a lot of fun to read. And it became so popular that it actually became more popular than the magazine in which it was contained. And Phineas Fingers became a board game of his own. And they also, in 1982, issued a set of Phineas Finger miniatures, role-playing miniatures, because when you play Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games, you usually use these, at that time they were metal, these metal die-cast figures in order to move them around on the board and track your adventures. So in 1982, they issue a 8-figure set of all the characters out of Phineas Fingers. So it became bigger than the magazine it was in. And if you're a gamer, like an old grognard gamer like I am from the 1970s and the 80s, then I'm sure that you know who Phineas Fingers was. He was an absolute legend. And unfortunately, he's kind of fallen by the wayside with Dungeons and Dragon magazine no longer being published. And he's now become a hidden comic book gem. But in 1981, TSR collects all of those storylines for the first 2 story arcs and publishes them in this Phineas Fingers Treasury. And it collects the first 2 arcs, which is the arc Dragon Quest, and then the second arc, which is Phineas versus the Cloud Giants. And it is absolutely wonderful stuff. So at the start of it, on the opening pages, you get who's who in the Phineas Fingers family. And it tells you all the main characters. So you've got Phineas Fingers up here, the thief and the titular character, and his 2 adventuring companions, Fred and Charlie, and then a bunch of other supporting cast members, such as Grand, the evil anti-paladin. And then this is the very first Phineas Fingers ever published in Dragon Magazine number 3 over here. And then you've got the subsequent magazine publishings. And you can see it's not up to the quality of Wormy, but it's very competently done. and the humor and the storylines in it are just epic. They're epic and they're hilarious. And I'll give you just sort of a flavor of the humor. So here in the very first magazine published, Dragon Magazine, where they go to the color comics, this is Attack on Telemark, which is the evil wizard's castle. And you've got Fred and Charlie, who are looking beat up and worse for wear after a hellacious fight that they've gone through. And then they're talking about the fight that they did with a little girl, her dog, a tin man, a lion that ran away, and a scarecrow. You've got this chopped up scarecrow down at the bottom. And that gives you pretty much a flavor of how this magazine is going to go from there. And it is absolutely just a fun blast, a fun ride to go through. The humor, the level of humor in it never drops off. It just keeps going. They're on a roller coaster pace. So they get to the Telemark castle of the evil wizard, and the evil wizard sends out Grand, his anti-paladin guard, in order to confront Fred, Charlie, and Phineas. And Fred pushes Charlie, or Phineas, up to the front. He says, "You're fighting him. I'm not fighting him. This was your idea." And then over here you have Phineas contemplating probable outcome number 1 and optional outcome number 2 of a fight with Grand. And the adventures in the castle continue. They wind up entangled with the wizard, a red dragon, a paladin that is going after the dragon. And then at the end of the Dragon Quest story arc, it all culminates in a giant standoff with Phineas and a troll up on the side of a mountain that's handing him an arm when he asks for a hand. And then you've got the wizard that has tried to get the jump on Fred and Charlie. Then Grand gets the jump on Fred and Charlie. Then the dragon Scrag, the red dragon Scrag, gets the jump on them. And then the paladin gets the jump on the dragon. And they're all sitting there trying to decide what's going to happen. And then over here, Grand breaks the stalemate. So Grand, the evil anti-paladin, I'll put that up there for you to look at a little bit. Grand thinks to himself, "It's time to break this deadlock. We'll probably all die, but I'm chaotic evil and don't care. Besides, I'm an anti-paladin whose real purpose in life is to slay paladins. So, die, paladin." And then all hell breaks loose at that point. But Grand gets hit in the head with a 30-pound boulder again, the second time in this strip. Everybody but Fred and Charlie is laying on the ground stretched out. And then Phineas says, "I'm not sure what I believe what I just saw. I mean, who writes this strip anyway?" And then speaking of who writes the strip, after that you get a little biography by the artist, who was doing this from 1976 to 80 while he's a student at Auburn. And in 80 he graduates and he actually becomes a Navy A-6 bomber pilot. So good on him. I knew I liked this magazine for a reason. So at that point, when he becomes a Navy pilot, predictably the magazine, the strip Finieous Fingers tapers off. But after that little insert about the author J.D. Webster, then you have the second story arc, which is Phineas versus the Cloud Giants. And it starts off with Phineas and his buddies, Fred and Charlie, getting captured by Orcus, the demon lord, who has lost his wand, the Wand of Orcus, which is a famous artifact in Dungeons & Dragons. And he sends Phineas and company up to the Cloud Giants to steal it back. And they get helped out here at one point by a wizard who pops up in these stories periodically named Boardflack. And Boardflack the wizard is famous because he carries 2 very powerful magical wands with him. The first is the Wand of Automatic Missiles, which is a Thompson submachine gun. And the second is a Wand of Fireballs, which is a bazooka rocket launcher. And it's classic stuff. If you like role-playing gaming, any type of role-play gaming, even if it's not Dungeons & Dragons, you're really going to enjoy the humor in here. It's just wonderfully executed by J.D. Webster. The basic quality of the artwork in here, it really plays to the humor level in here, to the kind of tongue-in-cheek humor that's rolling on it through the whole magazine. And it really works wonderful, and it grows on you through the comic book. Like I said, this did become bigger than the comic book itself, and in 1982, a company called Marzakk Publishing issued a box set of 8 of the figures who are contained within the magazine here, with, of course, Phineas, Fred, Charlie, Grand, Boardflack, and a number of other figures that appeared in the magazine. and they were sculpted by Tom Meyer. And Tom Meyer is a living legend within the sculptor community. We're making all of these wargaming figures as absolutely the most famous sculptor within that community at large. He's the guy who figured out how to use dual epoxy milliput molding clay in order to sculpt really finely detailed figures. And within that, admittedly, very niche community, the man is an absolute living legend. So he sculpts 8 of these figures. They put them in a box set, and 10 of these box sets, they randomly put in 8 figures that are actually gold-plated. And these box sets, as you can imagine, have become highly collectible and highly sought after. And even any single figure, whether it's gold-plated or not, if it shows up at all, if you can find one for sale at all, individual figures by themselves run in the hundreds and hundreds of dollars. They're so sought after. That's because it's such a fantastic magazine, such a fantastic comic book that ran in Dragon magazine. In terms of availability, surprisingly, availability of this treasure right here is pretty easy. You can get these on eBay for about $40. Very good shape. This one's in excellent shape. The other thing, though, is if you're looking for the figures, again, they're going to be very hard to find. There is an online publication of all of the strips of Finieous Fingers, but TSR is just notorious for having Doberman-like attorneys that go after anybody who violates their IP, their intellectual property rights. Sorry, it's very late at night. You got to cut me a little bit of slack. I keep saying I'm going to stop filming these videos late at night when my brain is barely functioning, and then this is the only time I can do it. But their IP, they've just got a battery of absolutely Doberman-like attorneys that will go after anybody. So I'm not going to link that down here, but if you do a Google search, you'll hit on it. Just make sure that your antivirus software is up to date before you go and click on it. But that anthology site out there on the internet, it has every single Finieous Fingers ever published. But that's it. I've got this in. I haven't stumbled over my words too badly, so I'm going to call it a wrap. And this is Grammaticus Books saying take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys next time.